AI for questioning my brother's worthless boxes after Grandma left me the real proof? I'm Layla, 38, and in my family, I was always the daughter who understood. If dinner got awkward, I changed the subject. If my mom cried, I backed down. If my brother Brandon wanted something, everyone somehow expected me to be the reasonable one, the quiet one, the one who would go home, make tea, fold laundry, and convince myself it wasn't worth a fight. My mother Elaine called that peace. My father Martin called it keeping the family together. Brandon never had to call it anything. He just benefited from it. Brandon is 3 years older than me, and for as long as I can remember, he didn't ask for things. He announced what he needed, and the room adjusted around him. He needed the bigger bedroom because he had more sports gear. He needed help with bills because he was getting back on his feet. He needed the first pick of family photos, holiday dishes, keepsakes, anything with sentimental value, because according to my mother, Brandon feels things deeply, even if he doesn't show it. I felt things too. I just learned not to make them inconvenient. Grandma Ruth was the only person who seemed to notice. She wasn't loud about it. She didn't pull people aside and accuse them. She had a quieter way of seeing through everybody. When I visited her, she always had my favorite oatmeal cookies in a tin on the counter, the soft kind with cinnamon and too many raisins. She kept one chipped yellow mug near the coffee maker because she said tea tasted better in it when I drank it. She asked real questions and waited for real answers. If I said, "I'm fine," she would look at me over her glasses and say, "That wasn't what I asked." One afternoon, after Brandon had stopped by her house and casually mentioned that her old cedar chest would look good in his living room someday, Grandma Ruth waited until he left and said, "Your brother has a gift." I laughed because I thought she meant charm. She shook her head. He can sound generous while mentally putting his name on things. That was Grandma. One sentence, soft voice, no drama, and somehow the whole room got brighter. A few months before she died, she gave me a sealed envelope while I was helping her sort recipe cards at her kitchen table. Her hands were thin by then, her rings loose, but her mind was still sharp enough to cut glass. "Keep this somewhere boring," she said. Boring. Somewhere nobody would look because nobody cares enough to look. A folder with appliance manuals. A box with old tax papers. Something like that. I smiled. "Grandma, is this a treasure map?" She smiled back, but her eyes didn't. "Open it if anyone ever tells you not to ask questions." I wanted to ask what she meant, but she patted my hand and changed the subject to whether I still overcooked chicken. I tucked the envelope into an old recipe tin when I got home and told myself it was probably a letter, maybe instructions about a necklace or a photo album. Something sentimental. Something private. Then Grandma Ruth died at 86, and my family turned grief into a locked door. First, I didn't question anything. I was sad in that slow, heavy way where normal tasks felt disrespectful because she wasn't here to answer the phone anymore. My mom was constantly tired and teary. Dad looked smaller somehow, like every conversation wore him down. Brandon kept saying he was handling the hard stuff, which mostly seemed to mean attending meetings I was never told about. Whenever I asked about paperwork, my mother answered like I had asked for Grandma's jewelry at the funeral. "It's all being handled, honey. Don't stress yourself. The paperwork is complicated. Your father and Brandon sat through the boring stuff so you wouldn't have to." I wanted to believe that. It was easier. Being suspicious while everyone was grieving made me feel dirty, like I was insulting Grandma by thinking about documents. So I let it go the first time, then the second. But small things started stacking up. I went to my parents' house one Saturday and saw Grandma's framed black and white wedding photo leaning against the wall in the hallway. It had always hung above her piano. When I asked why it was there, Mom said Brandon had picked up some things from the storage unit and was keeping them safe. A week later, Brandon sent a picture in the family group chat of Grandma's cedar chest, sitting in his garage behind a stack of paint cans. "Got this out before storage fees got ridiculous," he wrote. I stared at the photo for a long time. The chest was scratched along the side where Grandma used to run her fingers when she was thinking. I asked, "Were we supposed to go through those things together?" Brandon replied, "Relax, Layla. It's not like I'm selling family heirlooms on the street." Mom added a heart emoji and wrote, "Your brother is helping so much." Dad wrote nothing. Later was my family's favorite word for never, so when Dad told me, We can sort all of that out later. I felt something tighten in my chest. The real pressure came at Sunday dinner. Mom invited me over and said she was making roast chicken because we should all sit down like a family. That should have warned me. My family only said like a family when someone had already decided what role I was supposed to play. The table was too neat when I arrived. Plates already set. Water glasses already filled. A basket of rolls covered with a clean dish towel. Brandon was sitting in his usual chair, scrolling through his phone. Dad stood near the sink with his sleeves rolled up, rinsing a pan that was already clean. Mom kept touching the edge of a manila folder beside her plate. I sat down and tried not to look at it. Dinner was stiff. Mom talked about grocery prices. Brandon complained about traffic. Dad nodded at everything and ate too fast. Nobody mentioned Grandma until Mom cleared her throat and slid the folder across the table. "This is just something simple we need you to sign," she said. Her voice was sweet, but her shoulders were tight. "So the estate can finally be peaceful." A pen was already placed beside the packet. I opened the folder. The first page said receipt and release. The wording was dense, but one sentence jumped out immediately. It said I acknowledged receiving everything I was entitled to and waived any further accounting. I looked up. "Where are the trust documents?" Mom blinked. "What?" "The complete trust. The inventory. The appraisal report. Whatever this release is based on." Brandon gave a short laugh without looking up from his phone. "Here we go." I kept my eyes on Mom. I can't sign something saying I received everything before anyone shows me what everything is. Dad set his fork down softly. "Layla, don't make this harder than it needs to be." That sentence landed in a place that was already bruised. "I'm asking to read documents before I sign a legal release," I said. "That shouldn't be hard." Mom's face changed, not dramatically, just enough. Her mouth pressed thin. "Your grandmother trusted us. Then showing me the paperwork should be easy." Brandon tossed his phone onto the table. "It's not like you ever cared about Grandma's stuff until now." I felt heat rise in my face, but I didn't take the bait. I cared about Grandma. That's why I'm asking why her things are being distributed without me seeing a list. Mom put a hand to her chest. "You are making grief feel ugly." There it was. The old trick. If I asked a question, the problem became my tone. If I noticed something unfair, the problem became my timing. If I wanted basic information, I was hurting someone's feelings. I closed the packet and pushed it back. "I'm not signing tonight. Send me the complete trust, inventory, appraisal, and accounting. I'll review it." Brandon leaned back in his chair. "You didn't care until you heard there might be money." "Did I hear there might be money?" I asked. "Or did everyone just start acting nervous when I asked for paperwork?" No one answered. I left before dessert. Mom followed me to the door with tears already shining in her eyes. "I just wanted one thing in this family to be peaceful," she whispered. I looked at her hand gripping the door frame. For a second I almost apologized. Habit is a powerful thing. Then I remembered the release sitting by my plate like a trap. "Peace isn't signing blind," I said. By the time I got home, the family group chat had exploded. Mom wrote, "I am heartbroken that grief has turned into money questions. Grandma Ruth would hate seeing this." Brandon wrote, "Some people only show up when they think there is something to take." Aunt Carol, my dad's sister, wrote, "Layla, your parents have been through enough. This is shameful." Another cousin sent me a private text that just said, "Seriously? Mom didn't say I asked for documents. She said I was attacking the family." Brandon didn't say I refused to waive accounting before seeing accounting. He said I was trying to profit from death. I sat at my kitchen table with the unsigned packet in front of me, and my phone buzzing every few minutes. I didn't cry. I wanted to, but something colder had started moving underneath the hurt. Then Natalie, one of my younger cousins, messaged me privately. "I don't know what's really going on," she wrote, "but they've been talking about this for weeks." I stared at that line. A second message came in. "I'm sorry. I thought you knew." Then screenshots. One showed Brandon writing, "Don't give her time to overthink it. She'll sign if everyone stays firm." Another showed Mom writing, "Layla will turn this into a process if we let her. She always needs to feel included." Included. Not informed. Not respected. Included like I was a child begging to sit at the adult table. In another screenshot, Aunt Carol had asked if I had seen the paperwork and Mom had replied, "She doesn't need to see every page. It will only confuse her and make her emotional." I put my phone down and pressed both hands flat against the table. I had walked into that Sunday dinner thinking we were grieving together. Really, I was walking into a room where the ending had already been assigned to me. That night, I reread the release packet slowly. I highlighted every phrase that felt wrong. Personal property distributed by agreement. No list attached. Appraisal available upon request. No appraisal attached. Beneficiary acknowledges no further claims. No inventory attached. The packet was written like the ending of a story I had not been allowed to read. Around 10:30, Mom called. I didn't answer. A voicemail appeared a minute later. Her voice was soft and tired. "Layla, honey, just sign it. Please. Your brother needs this more than you. You're stronger than he is. You've always understood that. Don't let paperwork destroy this family." I replayed it twice, not because I needed to hear it again, but because I needed to stop pretending I had misunderstood. Your brother needs this more than you. There it was in her own voice. Not fairness. Not Grandma's wishes. Need. Brandon needed, and I was supposed to disappear around it. That phrase, "You've always understood," pulled something from the back of my mind. Grandma Ruth's envelope. I went to the hallway closet and took down the old recipe tin where I kept random papers I never used but couldn't throw away. Instruction manuals. Warranty cards. A recipe for lemon bars I had never made. At the bottom was the envelope, cream-colored, my name written in Grandma's careful handwriting. My hands were shaking before I opened it, because some part of me already knew. Inside was a notarized letter, a copy of a trust amendment, a beneficiary form, and a safe deposit box key taped to an old recipe card for pot roast. There was also a business card for Ms. Coleman, the estate attorney. I unfolded the letter first. Layla, if you are reading this, someone has probably told you not to ask questions. I am sorry for that. I have watched you be trained to surrender, and then praised for calling it kindness. Understanding does not mean surrendering. Do not let anyone turn your kindness into permission. Ask for the papers. Ask twice if you need to. If they are angry that you want the truth, that will tell you why I wrote this. Your mother once told your father, "Layla will understand. Brandon needs something stable." I do not want my wishes translated through that sentence. The attached documents are not everything, but they are enough to get you through the first door. Ms. Coleman has the full file. You have the right to review it before signing anything. I love you. Not because you make things easy, because you are you. Grandma Ruth. I read it once. Then again. By the third time, tears had dropped onto the table, but they were not the same tears I had been fighting all week. They were grief, yes, but they were also relief. Validation can hurt when it arrives too late for the person who gave it to explain it in her own voice. The trust amendment was dry and formal compared to the letter, but I understood enough to see my name in places my family had not mentioned. It named me as a protected beneficiary for specific assets, including a safe deposit box, a small investment account connected through beneficiary paperwork, and a collection of original illustrations, licensing records, jewelry, and related collectibles. There was a clause stating that I had the right to demand a full accounting before signing any release. Another line said anyone who concealed, removed, transferred, or sold those assets before review could be required to return or account for them, and could lose control over those items. I sat there for a long time with the safe deposit key in my palm. They didn't hide the truth because it was complicated. They hid it because it worked better for them when I was confused. The next morning I emailed Ms. Coleman. Kept it simple. I attached scans of the letter, amendment, release packet, and Mom's voicemail transcript. I wrote that I had been asked to sign a release without full documentation and wanted copies of the complete trust, inventory, appraisal, and accounting before taking any action. Her reply came later that afternoon. Layla, you are entitled to review the complete trust documents and inventory before executing any release. Please do not sign anything until we have discussed the file. I will schedule a formal meeting and provide the relevant materials. I stared at that email for a full minute. For the first time since Grandma died, Someone responded to my question by answering it. Over the next several days, documents started arriving through Miss Coleman instead of my mother. The difference was immediate. No guilt. No sighing. No family peace. Just attachments, dates, and formal language. The appraisal report made me cold. The worthless old boxes Brandon had joked about were not worthless. They contained original illustrations from a small but long-running series Grandma had worked on decades earlier. Licensing records connected to reprints and merchandise, antique jewelry, sign books, and collectible prints. Not a fortune in some ridiculous movie way, but valuable enough that no honest person would throw them into a garage and call them clutter. One page listed items that matched the boxes Brandon had removed from storage before I was given any inventory. Another document showed storage unit access dates. Brandon had signed for entry twice after Grandma died, and before the first formal accounting draft. Then Ms. Coleman forwarded something that made my stomach turn. A note that Brandon had contacted a buyer, asking whether original illustrations and related licensing files could be evaluated before family distribution was finalized. He had not been keeping anything safe. He had been shopping around the value while calling me greedy for wanting to know what existed. I didn't confront him. I didn't call my mother. I didn't send a paragraph to the group chat, even though I drafted about 15 in my head. Instead, I bought a pack of folders, printed everything, and made tabs at my kitchen table. Release packet. Missing attachments. Group chat screenshots. Natalie screenshots. Voicemail transcript. Miss Coleman emails. Trust amendment. Appraisal. Storage unit access. Brandon buyer inquiry. Timeline. I stopped rehearsing comebacks and started making copies. Mom tried one more private guilt trip before the meeting. She called from her number, then Dad's, then Brandon's. I didn't answer until she texted, "Please don't make me beg to speak to my daughter." That one almost worked. It was designed to. I answered and put the phone on speaker. Mom was already crying. "Layla, your grandmother would be ashamed of this." I looked at Grandma's letter lying beside my folder. "No," I said. "She wouldn't." Mom inhaled sharply. "You don't know that." "I know more than you think." Silence. Then her voice changed. "Not much, but enough." "What does that mean?" "It means I'm not discussing legal documents over guilt anymore. All estate communication goes through Ms. Coleman or in writing. I am your mother." "Then you should have wanted me informed before you wanted me quiet." She started to cry harder. "Why does everything have to become a fight with you?" I almost laughed, but it would have sounded cruel. Asking for paperwork isn't a fight. Hiding it is. I hung up before she could pull me back into the old rhythm. The formal meeting was held in Ms. Coleman's conference room the following week. The room was plain and cold, with a long table, water cups, legal pads, and a clock that ticked louder than it needed to. Mom came dressed in black, clutching tissues like she was attending a second funeral. Dad sat beside her with his hands folded and his eyes on the table. Brandon leaned back in his chair, arms crossed, jaw set in that bored expression he used whenever he wanted people to think he was above the conversation. Aunt Carol was there too. Mom had invited her as a family witness, which meant she thought shame worked better with an audience. Carol gave me a tight look when I walked in, like she was disappointed before I had said one word. Miss Coleman entered with a folder of her own. She was calm, polished, and completely unmoved by the emotional weather in the room. "Thank you for coming," she said. "The purpose of today's meeting is to clarify the status of the trust documents, the requested release, and the disputed personal property." Mom dabbed at her eyes immediately. "I just don't understand why my daughter wants to make this ugly." Brandon gave a humorless laugh. "She barely showed up until money was involved." I felt the old impulse to defend myself, to explain every visit, every call, every afternoon with Grandma Ruth. But I had learned something in the past week. People committed to misunderstanding you will use your explanations as raw material. So I opened my folder. "You called me greedy because you thought I didn't have the paperwork," I said. Brandon rolled his eyes. "This is exactly what I'm talking about." I looked at Miss Coleman. "May I begin with the release?" She nodded. I slid a copy of the packet to the center of the table. This is what I was handed at Sunday dinner. I was asked to sign a document saying I received everything I was entitled to and waived further accounting. At that point, I had not been given the complete trust, the inventory, the appraisal report, or the list of personal property already removed. Aunt Carol's expression shifted slightly. Mom said, "We didn't want to overwhelm you. You wanted my signature before you wanted my understanding," I said. Dad murmured, "Layla, let's not do this right now." I turned to him. "This is exactly where we do this." He looked down again. I laid out the printed screenshots next. The group chat messages. Mom framing me as someone turning grief into a transaction. Brandon saying I only showed up when there was something to take. Relatives calling me shameful before I had ever seen the inventory. Then I placed Natalie's screenshots beside them. "These are from before the Sunday dinner," I said. Brandon wrote, "Don't give her time to overthink it. She'll sign if everyone stays firm." Mom wrote, "She doesn't need to see every page." Aunt Carol leaned forward and read the page. Her mouth opened a little, then closed. "Elaine," she said quietly, "you told me Layla had already seen everything." Mom's face flushed. I said she knew enough. "No," I said. "You said I was greedy. That's different." Brandon sat up. "Oh my God, are we really doing screenshots like teenagers?" "You used the group chat to make me the villain," I said. "I'm using the same words to show how you did it." Then I played the voicemail. Mom's voice filled the room, soft and pleading. "Layla, honey, just sign it. Please. Your brother needs this more than you. You're stronger than he is. You've always understood that. Don't let paperwork destroy this family." No one moved. Mom looked like someone had slapped her. "That is taken completely out of context." I turned to her. "What context makes that fair?" She didn't answer. Brandon muttered, "This is humiliating." "Not yet," I said. Miss Coleman didn't smile. She simply opened her folder and spoke in the same steady tone. "The amendment provided by Layla matches the executed amendment in my file. It is valid. Layla is a named protected beneficiary of specific assets and is entitled to review the complete trust and inventory before signing any release. A beneficiary cannot be pressured to waive accounting without disclosure." Mom's tissue stopped halfway to her face. Aunt Carol turned toward my father. "Martin, did you know about this amendment?" Dad rubbed his forehead. "I knew there was some language. I didn't know all the details." I looked at him. "When did you know?" He kept rubbing his forehead like the answer might be hidden there. "Before dinner." The room went still. "Before you told me not to make this harder than it needed to be?" I asked. He swallowed. "Your mother was under a lot of stress. I thought it would be easier if we just moved forward." That hurt more than I expected. Maybe because I had always given Dad the softer role in my mind. Mom pushed. Brandon took. Dad stood nearby looking tired, and I had mistaken tired for innocent. "You didn't stay out of it, Dad," I said. "You stood exactly where it benefited them." His eyes flicked up, wounded, but I was done protecting him from the consequences of his own silence. Miss Coleman moved to the disputed property. She placed the appraisal report on the table. The items referred to as storage boxes include original illustrations, licensing records, jewelry, sign materials, and collectible prints. Several items appear to have been removed from storage before Layla received an accounting. "Brandon, can you identify the current location of those items?" Brandon's face hardened. "I was keeping the boxes safe." Miss Coleman turned a page. "Did keeping them safe include contacting a buyer for evaluation before family distribution was finalized?" Aunt Carol whispered, "Brandon." He glared at me. "You really brought all this in here?" I met his eyes. "If they were worthless, why did you get them appraised before I even saw the inventory?" I was trying to understand what we were dealing with. Then why tell everyone I was greedy for trying to understand the same thing? He had no answer for that. For the first time in my life, Brandon had to answer a question without Mom jumping in to translate it into innocence. Mom tried anyway. "He was overwhelmed," she said. "We all were. People make mistakes when they're grieving." Miss Coleman looked at her. "The removed property must be returned or formally accounted for. I strongly recommend that no estate property be sold until this matter is reviewed. If cooperation is not prompt, The trust may need to seek court intervention and reimbursement of costs associated with recovery. Brandon's board mask was gone. Court? Over boxes. Ms. Coleman replied. Over trust property. For words. Calm. Clean. Final. Mom began crying in earnest then. Not quiet tears, but the kind meant to pull the whole room toward her. I cannot believe my own daughter would humiliate this family like this, she said. After everything I have done. After losing my mother. I felt Aunt Carol watching me. Dad was staring at the table. Brandon's jaw twitched. I waited until Mom stopped long enough to breathe. No, I said. You kept this private when you thought I was powerless. You made it public when you called me greedy. I'm just finishing the conversation with facts. Mom looked at me like she didn't recognize me. Maybe she didn't. The old Layla would have lowered her voice by then. The old Layla would have said, "Can we talk privately?" The old Layla would have tried to make the room less uncomfortable for the people who created the discomfort. I wasn't that Layla in that room. Miss Coleman outlined the next steps. Brandon had to return the boxes, licensing records, jewelry, and any other trust property he had removed by a written deadline. The estate accounting would be reopened. An independent fiduciary would review the assets and distributions. No release would be signed until the complete accounting was provided and reviewed. Any legal costs tied to recovering property improperly removed could be charged back to the person responsible. From that point on, nothing moved by family pressure. It moved by paper. When the meeting ended, Aunt Carol stayed behind in the hallway while Mom rushed ahead, crying into her phone. Brandon stormed out without looking at anyone. Dad lingered near the conference room door like a man hoping the floor would make a decision for him. Carol approached me with her arms folded, but her face had changed. Layla, she said, your mother made it sound like you were threatening everyone. I know. I didn't know you hadn't seen the paperwork. I know that too. She looked past me toward Dad. Martin, you knew? Dad didn't answer. Carol's eyes filled with anger, not at me this time. I owe you an apology, she said. I nodded. I appreciated it, but I didn't comfort her. That was another habit I was trying to quit. That evening I sent one message to the family group chat. You were told I was greedy. Here is what I was actually asking for. Then I attached a concise timeline, the Sunday dinner release, the missing document requests, the group chat screenshots, the voicemail transcript, and Ms. Coleman's confirmation that I had the right to review the trust and inventory before signing anything. I did not include every legal document. I did not rant. I did not beg. The people who had been loudest suddenly had nothing to say. One cousin reacted with a thumbs up, then removed it. Aunt Carol wrote, I was wrong to judge Layla without knowing the facts. Natalie texted me privately, I'm sorry I didn't send those sooner. Mom left the group chat for 2 days, then came back and wrote, this family has lost its sense of compassion. No one replied. The consequences weren't instant, but they were real. Brandon returned the boxes in stages, each time acting like he was doing everyone a favor. Some items came back in plastic bins. Some came back wrapped badly in towels. The cedar chest had a new scratch down one side, and one file box smelled like his garage, oil and dust and stale cardboard. Miss Coleman documented everything. The independent fiduciary requested receipts, access logs, emails, and records of any attempted valuation or sale. Brandon had to reimburse costs tied to tracking and recovering property he never should have removed. He complained that I had made him look like a criminal. I told him in writing, I described what happened. How it looks is not my responsibility. He stopped texting after that. The appraisal confirmed that Grandma's collection had more value than anyone had admitted to me, especially the licensing records. Some items needed further review before distribution. The safe deposit box contained additional beneficiary paperwork, a few pieces of jewelry Grandma had specifically marked for me, and another copy of the amendment. Practical to the end, Grandma had not trusted one copy to survive my family. When I held the jewelry, I didn't feel victorious. I felt sad. Not because of the objects themselves, but because Grandma had known she needed to protect me from the people who were supposed to protect me. Dad called a week after the meeting. I let it go to voicemail first. Then I listened. Layla, I never wanted you hurt. I thought if we just got through it, everyone would calm down. Nobody was trying to hurt you. I called him back because some things needed to be said out loud. He answered on the first ring. Honey, he said, sounding relieved. Don't call me that right now. Silence. Then softer. Okay. I said. You knew there was paperwork I hadn't seen and you told me to sign anyway. I didn't understand all of it. You understood enough to know I was being rushed. He sighed. Your mother was falling apart. Brandon was angry. I didn't want to upset anyone. You did upset someone, I said. Me. You just thought I would absorb it quietly. He didn't deny it. That was the closest he came to honesty. I'm sorry, he said. For what? Another silence. For not speaking up. That is part of it, I said. But you also let them use your silence as permission. You let Mom tell people I was greedy when you knew I was asking for documents. You let Brandon remove things and call it helping. You didn't want peace. You wanted my silence. His breath caught. I don't know how to fix this. You don't fix it by asking me to make everyone comfortable again. We didn't have a dramatic reconciliation. He said he understood. I don't know if he did. But he stopped asking me to talk to Mom just to smooth things over. And that was the first useful thing he had done in months. Mom kept trying in different ways. First came the wounded texts. I hope the paperwork is worth losing your mother. Then the nostalgic ones. I found an old photo of you and Brandon. We used to be such a happy family. Then the religious-sounding ones, even though Mom only got spiritual when she needed a bigger authority to agree with her. Your grandmother believed in forgiveness. I responded once. All estate communication needs to be in writing and copied to Miss Coleman. Personal guilt messages will not get a response. She wrote. So cold. I didn't answer. Brandon tried to corner me at my parents' house when I stopped by to pick up a box of my own old things that had somehow been mixed in with Grandma's belongings. He stood in the driveway with his arms crossed and said, Hope you're proud. Mom cries every night. I put the box in my car and closed the trunk. She cried when I asked for paperwork too, I said. Her tears aren't instructions. His face twisted. You're acting like you're better than us. No, I said. I'm acting like I'm not below you. That's what feels different. He stared at me like he wanted to say something cutting, but couldn't find anything that didn't sound like an admission. So he walked away. The estate review took time. There were forms, signatures, corrected inventories, meetings I attended with my own notes, and emails that said things like please confirm receipt, and attached for review. It was boring in the way truth often is after a dramatic lie collapses. Boring was good. Boring meant no one could slide a packet across a dinner table and call pressure love. Eventually, I received what Grandma Ruth had legally left me. The investment account paperwork was processed. The jewelry and personal items were documented properly. The illustration collection and licensing records were handled under supervision, instead of disappearing into Brandon's garage. Some items were preserved. Some were evaluated. Nothing was moved without a record. Brandon lost more than money. He lost the family image of being the responsible son who handled things. People still spoke to him, of course. Families don't rewrite themselves overnight. But the automatic defense was gone. When he complained, Aunt Carol asked, Did you return everything yet? And the conversation died. Mom lost control of the story. That was what hurt her most. Not the paperwork. Not even the property. The story. For years, she could turn any conflict into proof that she was the wounded one and I was the difficult one. This time, her own messages, her own voicemail, and her own choices sat in front of everyone with dates on them. Dad lost the luxury of being neutral. I think he had always believed silence kept his hands clean. Now everyone knew silence had fingerprints. And I lost something too. I lost the version of my family I kept trying to earn by being easier to love. That grief was real. I won't pretend I walked away feeling powerful every second. Some nights I still reached for my phone when Mom texted because the old instinct to fix things ran deep. Sometimes I imagined Grandma Ruth at her kitchen table, and wished I could ask her why she hadn't told me everything while she was alive. But then I would reread her letter and understand. She had given me what I needed without turning her last months into a war. She had trusted me to open the envelope when I was ready to stop being managed. I bought a fireproof document bag and put her letter inside with the trust amendment copy, the safe deposit paperwork, and the final accounting. The yellow mug sits in my cabinet now. I use it most mornings. Not because tea tastes better in it, although maybe it does, but because it reminds me that someone saw me clearly before I saw myself clearly. My final boundary with my family was simple. I would not sign anything without legal review. I would not discuss legal matters over phone calls designed to make me feel guilty. I would not surrender assets to protect Mom's image. I would not pretend Dad's silence was kindness. I would not let Brandon's needs become my obligations. For the first time, nobody could make me the family shock absorber unless I agreed to stand there and take the impact. So I stopped standing there. I didn't fight them for money. I fought them because they were counting on me hating conflict more than I loved myself. If you liked it, don't forget to leave a comment and support the channel by subscribing. See you in the upcoming stories.